Welcome back to the live stream of the Wesleyan Church General Conference 2016. We are so honored and privileged to be joined right now by Dr. Bob Black from Southern Wesleyan University. And I have to say this, last night there was some disappointment from some of your family back in South Carolina that only your hands were on the live stream, and you handed this gavel, but it is great to have you, Dr. Black. And
that was not in the contract that I signed. I want you to know.
I love it.
Your denomination has to pay way more to get his face on camera. Yeah. So let's begin by just talking about the story that is connected with the gavel here.
Yeah, it's a great snapshot of what the cost of discipleship was for those early Wesleyans in the South. Mackenzie McPherson, as a member of Freedom's Hill, almost paid that ultimate price. Some other people did, not in the Freedom's Hill church, but in one of the other churches that Adam Crooks planted. There was a family that lost 3 sons who were killed because they wouldn't fight in the Confederate Army. One of the sons was only 12 years old. He was just killed to send a message.
Wow.
But Mackenzie McPherson was supposed to be a message, too. He was supposed to be an indicator to the rest of the community that something was being done about these agitators on the issue of slavery. But the amazing thing is, by the providence of God, and the providence of God comes into this story so many different places. By the providence of God, he survived the lynching. He also survived for 3 decades afterwards.
Right.
He became a different kind of symbol. He became a symbol of survival and success for the abolitionist movement, not what it was intended to be when he was lynched. I think it's providential that the church still stands, and that we've been able to relocate it on our campus at Southern Wesleyan. It could have been burned down any night by its enemies very, very easily. Yeah. But I think it's providential that it's still here and it still sends a message.
And not just standing there as a museum, but ministers still being commissioned there.
Right.
And that same spirit of that Adam Crooks said, by the grace of God, I'll go to North Carolina. It is still there with those students. We had an amazing time. You know, we talked about the history of our denomination, history of the church. We had an amazing time coming up here. We've heard Tony's side of the Luther Lee Mission Restaurant. Talk a little bit about his influence on our denomination.
Tony's?
Thank you. Yes. Could you spend about 40 minutes just talking about that?
It's huge. It's huge. Luther Lee was one of the founding 5 when the denomination began. They withdrew from the Methodist Church in November, December of 1842, and then the denomination began in May and June of 1843. So they were right there at the birth, at the creation of the denomination. Luther Lee was an amazing teacher, writer, debater.
Yeah, wow.
Brilliant.
Absolutely.
And fearless. He said on one occasion, we are going to disobey, as Wesleyans, we're going to disobey the Fugitive Slave Act. We want to tell you right up front. Did you say this in your spot? I haven't seen your spot yet.
No.
Okay. We're going to disobey the Fugitive Slave Act, and we want to go on record as saying we will. It's civil disobedience. We will pay the penalty if you enforce it, but we're going to tell you right up front we're not going to obey it. And he said, my name is Luther Lee. I live at 38 Onondaga Avenue, Syracuse, New York.
Yeah,
it's my address. Come see me if you don't like what we're doing.
Yeah, in his autobiography, he said that I would tell people, if you can get him here, I can get him to Canada free. And he says, my name, the name of my street, and the address were known as far south as Baltimore, Maryland. And so what I have said is, you can see in that where he's just saying to the law, this is who we are, this is who I am. And we're going to do this.
He reported, I know one year he reported to the denomination that his church had helped 300 slaves escape into Canada. And so it's almost one a day.
Yeah, in his autobiography, he says, "We did a very large business." That's an exact quote.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, man.
We also stopped over in Seneca Falls.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that.
It's so significant because it says the Wesleyan Church is abolitionist, yes, in those early days, and that was radical enough. But it was based on a principle that said we are here for the marginalized, we are here for the people who are powerless in our society. Well, slaves weren't the only ones who were. Women were powerless in the society. And so the church felt that it was wrong for women to be deprived of basic human rights. In a democracy, they weren't treated as first-class citizens. And so the organizers were not Wesleyan, but they came to the Wesleyans and said, it's your church that we want to use for this convention on women's rights and for the composition of a Declaration of Women's Rights. So the Wesleyan Church in Seneca Falls, New York, was the site of the first conference on women's rights in American history, and the place where the Declaration of Rights, and it's fascinating to read because it's based on the Declaration of Independence, but it's worded so that the focus is on women and the fact that they've been deprived of their rights. It's now a National Historic Site, as your followers would know, and the Wesleyan Chapel was not chosen by accident. It wasn't chosen just because it was convenient. It was chosen because they said, we have friends in the Wesleyans. These are people who care about those who are powerless in our society. And so in every book that's written about the drive for women's rights, and we're not talking about radical feminism. We're talking about basic human rights, the right to vote, the right to inherit property in some states, the right to be on a jury. Right. That was held at a Wesleyan church. By extension, Wesleyans were there for lay people. Lay people were powerless in the churches when they were under an episcopal system of government. The bishop appointed the pastor. The people accepted whoever they got. They basically had no vote. They had no rights within the church. And so Wesleyan said, in our system, we're going to have an equal representation of clergy and lay at annual conference every year and at general conference every 4 years. Yeah. And it's been one of the hallmarks of the church ever since.
You and I had a conversation yesterday or the day before, and how important is it for us to continue to have a voice concerning the women's rights movement and our history?
I think that's a natural place for us to have an impact and to spend some influence capital, to say that our principles haven't changed. In the first place, they held those principles because of their belief in holiness. If we are a holiness church, what does it look like to be a holiness church in the society of their day? Well, it's to be there for the slave, it's to be there for the woman, it's to be there for the laity. The details change, but the principles are still the same in our day. And so I think it's most natural thing in the world that Wesleyans are there to guard the rights of those who are powerless themselves.
Yeah.
It was really interesting when we were in Seneca Falls, and right next to the Wesleyan Chapel is it's kind of like the museum.
Right.
And I'm walking through the museum, and I'm reading the different exhibits and the extent of rights denied to women. I kind of knew a little bit of that, but I'm just reading one. You talk about property and right to vote, education, and there are actual articles there that just tell some really heartrending stories and sort of bring it home. We're talking, as you say, I think it's important to know, we're talking just about everyday things. We're not just talking about nitpicking, but everyday things.
And that's a point of clarification for how does it look today. It's not a blanket endorsement of whatever women or men or anybody else wants. It's got to be biblically based. Right. But biblically based, there should be fair treatment for all. And so I think we see that, for example, in the way the Wesleyan Church is reaching out in the immigrant issue
Yeah,
and saying
totally.
we're not offering we're not here to devise a political solution, but we're here to say compassion and concern should be shown for individuals. These are people, and they're people who are made in the image of God and the people that Christ died for.
Yeah, one of the things I love about our involvement with Immigrant Connection, I just say to people, and they, well, why is the church doing this? My response to that is that because we want to be part of the solution, not part of the cacophony of voices that are talking about everything that's wrong. Someone needs to be coming up with solutions. Real quick, you and I, again, we've had conversations that with these founders, a blueprint had already been laid with Wesley. Maybe talk a little bit about, within evangelicalism over the last century, you've had this tension when it comes to social and the spiritual holiness aspects, and part of that goes historically the fundamentalist movement, and I get all that. Talk about the tension and how Wesley just kept those things, just held together.
It's amazing. Wesley said to his preachers one time, "You have nothing to do but save souls. So spend and be spent in that work." And then he turned around and worked for the abolition of, or the end of the slave trade, abolition of slave trade at least. He worked for the deplorable conditions in England's prisons to alleviate those.
Prison reform.
He worked for the strengthening of the large majority of England's citizens that were below the poverty level, strengthening economically their situation, and did all sorts of progressive things. He created jobs programs. Before the government thought about doing that, Wesley did it under the banner of Methodism, creating a business to employ people, and the profits from the business went back into employing more people. That was the whole purpose of it. He instituted a free medical clinic in London because people couldn't afford to go to the doctor. He also wrote his own medical book, which that didn't turn out too well, but he tried.
Hey, one of his cures for baldness was rubbing onion on your head, but I'm just telling you, it doesn't work.
How'd it work?
I don't follow him on the medical stuff, okay?
Wesley, in his lifetime, made a fortune from the sale of his books and things like that, and at his death, it said that he left behind a ragged minister's robe and the Methodist Church. That's his legacy, because everything that came into his pockets flowed back out. He saw himself as a channel of God's resources to those who needed it more.
Yeah, very good.
You talk about legacy. 4 years ago, you and Dr. Keith Drury released the book, The Story of the Wesleyan Church, and to great fanfare, just a great book, great story of our denomination. So if you were writing just, an additional couple of pages at the end, what do you think you would say about the legacy of Dr. Joanne Lyon as she completes her term as GS?
Hasn't it been remarkable? Has it not been remarkable? She has extended the influence of the Wesleyan Church, but the Wesleyan message, even more importantly, into areas where we not only have not been able to reach before, didn't dream it was possible to be able to reach, into the Oval Office, into the United Nations, into World Economic Summits, and through her experience and through her witness and through her personal magnetism, she has established beachheads for the Wesleyan message that are just so invaluable, which is why at her retirement from the general superintendency, she's going to continue in that kind of work as an ambassador for the Wesleyan Church. It's the best news we could have that she's willing to do that.
Heath asked me last night what I thought the history would be, and I said her history will be that she tied us back to our history.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually going to steal that quote from him. Well, we want to thank...
Who did he steal it from? That's the first question.
So if you go to WPHstore.com, you can actually purchase The Story of the Wesleyan Church by Dr. Black and Dr. Keith Drury. Again, it's this beautiful, beautiful narrative of the Wesleyan Methodist Church, Pilgrim Holiness Church. Just a beautiful book. Dr. Black, thank you so much for joining us here today and for your insight to the things going on in our denomination. Hey, you can continue not only to watch, okay? We want you to interact. We have our chat room there at YouTube, but also we want to see those tweets. We want to see those Facebook posts on Instagram, hashtag made new. And right now we got to make new our configuration, because we're getting ready, coming right up in just a few moments, an interview with Dr. Mark Gorvet. So thank you for watching our continuing coverage of Wesleyan Conference 2016. You think they'd have let Luther Lee on the live stream team?
Luther Lee would have laid you guys out. I tell you what, it wouldn't even be close.
Are you saying he would chew the scenery?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
All right, we'll be right back. Thanks to Dr. Black.